Hello everyone, my name is Biljana Nikolovska-Brlja and today we will talk about the second and third conditional sentences. For a start, let's remind ourselves of the structure of the conditional sentences. They consist of two clauses, the if clause, which is a subordinate clause and presents the condition, and a main clause, which presents the result of this condition. When do we use the conditional sentences? When we want to express that the action in the main clause can take place only if a certain condition is fulfilled. There are three types of conditional sentences. I hope you all remember the first conditional. It is used to refer to the future and to say what is going to happen if a certain condition is met. Now, let's start with the subject of today's lesson, the second conditional. We use the second conditional when we want to talk about hypothetical and imaginary situations in the present. We introduce the imaginary situation with the if clause, which consists of if and the past tense, and the result of this condition is represented by would or wouldn't and the infinitive. Let's take a look at the example. If she was a pilot, she would fly a plane. But she isn't a pilot and she doesn't fly a plane. Of course, there is a possibility that in the future she may become a pilot and she may fly a plane, but now in the present, this is rather improbable. Sometimes we can use contractions, so instead of she would fly, we can say she'd fly. Also, we can use other modal verbs instead of would and say, if she was a pilot, she could fly a plane. The if clause can come at the beginning of the sentence, but remember, you need to use comma at the end of this clause, or it can come at the end of the sentence, and in this case, we do not need a comma. When we use I, he, she, or it in a sentence, we can either use was or were, and we can say, if I was a pilot, or if I were a pilot. Were is more formal and is often used in writing. An exception to this is if I were you, where, in this case, we cannot use was. Let's take a look at some more examples. If Sarah were here, she could help you with your math homework. This means that Sarah isn't here and she can't help you with your math homework. Jack might get that job if he passed the driving test. When he passes the driving test, he can get the job. If he got a scholarship, he would study abroad. This means that he doesn't have a scholarship now and he can't study abroad. And the last example, where would you study if you had a choice? Let's take a look at this exercise now. Put the verbs in the correct form to complete the second conditional sentences. You can pause the video now in order to do the exercise, and then you can check your answers. If you have finished with your exercise, you can check your answers now. Let's take a look at the first sentence. If you won the race, you would be famous. The second one. If I knew the answer, I'd tell you. The third sentence. My sister wouldn't speak to me if I broke it. The next one. My brother would stay in bed all day if he didn't have a job. And the last one. Would you run away if you saw a wolf? Okay, now we can go to the third conditional. When do we use the third conditional? When we talk about imaginary situations in the past, or if we want to imagine a different past, or in other words, when we want to say that something would have happened if something else had or hadn't happened. Let's take a look at the structure of the third conditional. We use past perfect in the if clause to represent the condition, and would or wouldn't plus have plus past participle in the second part of the sentence. For example, if you had invited me, I would have come. Or I would have come if you had invited me, which means that these two parts are interchangeable as in the second conditional. Remember, you need to use comma if you start with the if clause. We can also use other modal verbs instead of would. For example, if I had known about the problem, I could have helped you, or I might have helped you. Let's take a look at some more examples now. If the weather hadn't been good, we wouldn't have gone out. This means that the weather was good, so we did go out. The next example. If the exam hadn't been so difficult, I would have passed. This means that the exam was so difficult that I didn't pass. And the last example, I would have understood them if I had studied German. This means that I didn't study German, probably at school, so I didn't understand what they were saying. Now let's take a look at this exercise. Put the verbs in the correct form to complete the third conditional sentences. You can pause the video again, do the exercise, and then check your answers. If you have finished with your exercise, you can check your answers now. If I had taken the train, I would have got there on time, was the answer to the first sentence. The second one. If she hadn't been ill, she would have gone to the party. The next one. There wouldn't have been an accident if she had driven more carefully. The fourth one. They would have finished the room if they had had more time. And the last one. What would you have done if you had forgotten the key? I hope all the answers were correct. If you need some additional exercises, you can check out these links. Thank you for your attention.